Well, Labor says it won't be deterred from passing its controversial second wave of industrial relations reforms, despite concerns from the mining and construction industries that it could cause labour hire demand to drop and incur massive costs. Joining me now live is Manager of Opposition Business Paul Fletcher. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Labor says that it has consulted with industry on this. Do you share those concerns from miners and the construction sector?
Well, Danica, BHP this morning is reported as saying Labor's so-called same job, same pay laws are likely to cost it $1.3 billion. The fact is that the union bosses don't like labour hire firms because they see it as a threat to getting as many workers unionised as possible. Even though labour hire makes up only a bit over 2% of the entire workforce, and it meets important needs in our very competitive and highly productive mining sector and our other big industries to deal with peaks and troughs, for example. What BHP and others are pointing out is that this second round of industrial relations changes, Labor already made sweeping changes last year, will add new costs. There's no associated productivity benefit. And let's bear in mind that the resources sector generates hundreds of billions of dollars in export revenue, generates very substantial tax revenue, which pays for schools and roads and hospitals. At a time when our economy needs to be more productive, Labor is busy taking us back to the 1950s in terms of industrial relations settings. And it's all because the union bosses liked things in the 1950s. They don't like things so much the way they are now. And of course, the union bosses control the pre-selections of just about every Labor member of Parliament. So Labor is dancing to the tune of its union masters yet again, without a care for the impact this will have on productivity and on Australian businesses being globally competitive.
All right, let's move on now. We've got a bit to get through. I want to talk to you about aged care. There's a story today that says that about more than 20 homes have closed since September. And that the sector is struggling with Labor's stringent reforms. I guess it's a tough one here. You want to protect the elderly, but what more can be done to boost the sector?
This is exactly what the Coalition warned would happen. We established the Royal Commission into Aged Care when in government. That came down with a series of recommendations, including a time frame to institute a range of reforms, including the provision of nursing care 24 hours. What Labor chose to do was go after a headline by imposing that significantly earlier than the Royal Commission had recommended. We warned that this would cause problems because it put the operators of aged care facilities into a position of trying to get the necessary skilled nursing staff in a very difficult labour market. Now, what we now know, thanks to great work by Shadow Health Minister Anne Ruston asking questions that the government has reluctantly answered, 23 aged care facilities around Australia have closed since late last year. Wesley, for example, announced the closure of 3 homes in Sydney. There's another 3 in Perth, Brightwater, I think it is. Now, in every one of these closures, that means vulnerable elderly Australians are forced to find somewhere else to live. It causes great stress and anxiety to them and to their families. Many of these are patients suffering dementia. And so the unfortunate thing is because Labor's gone after a quick political headline without understanding the implications of this for the sustained operation of nursing homes, it's causing these problems. And that's even before we start talking about the problems in regional and remote nursing homes, which are also, or aged care facilities, which are also closing.
Wouldn't you, if you have a loved one in an aged care facility, wouldn't you take comfort in the fact that the federal government is doing all it can and quickly to try and protect the sector, to bring forward those recommendations?
It is certainly important that everything be done to protect residents in aged care. That is why we established the Aged Care Royal Commission. And that laid down a series of recommendations, which of course balances up the competing considerations. What good is it to an elderly Australian or their family to be told, oh, well, if the nursing home you lived in hadn't shut down, it would have 24-hour nursing care? And so Labor has gone after the cheap headline without understanding the operational complexities here. And the result is that a significant number of older Australians are put into a very difficult position. So yes, we must have 24-hour nursing care as soon as it practically can be delivered. And the Aged Care Royal Commission set out a timetable for that. Labor, in pursuit of a headline, decided to impose a draconian requirement ahead of that timetable, and we're seeing the entirely predictable consequences, and that is very unfortunate for older Australians who are affected by this and their families.
Paul Fletcher, we have to leave it there. We've run out of time. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.